flight that changed everything. The night was calm over Los Angeles airport. But inside the terminal, the atmosphere was tense. People were restless, clutching their passports, waiting for the long flight to Tokyo. It was the kind of flight that carried all sorts of passengers: businessmen with briefcases, families with kids, tourists filled with excitement, and a few who seemed to carry heavy secrets. Among them stood Keanu Reeves, dressed simply in a black hoodie and jeans, a backpack slung over his shoulder. To most people, he blended in like any other traveler. No entourage, no special treatment. He had insisted on flying commercial even though he could afford private jets. Humility was something he guarded like a treasure. The flight attendants whispered when they recognized him, but Keanu smiled gently, nodding, asking for nothing more than peace. He carried his own bag, waited in line, and moved through security without complaint. That humility, that quiet presence, was why people loved him. As boarding began, a commotion broke out near the gate. A group of young men, loud and aggressive, were mocking another passenger. It was a woman in her mid-30s, with darker skin and tired eyes. She held her ticket tightly, trying to ignore the words being thrown at her. "Hey, wrong country." "Wrong plane," one of the men sneered. Another laughed. "Hope you can even understand the pilot." The words cut through the air, sharp and cruel. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably, but most pretended not to hear. People often look away. When hate appears in public, it is easier to avoid trouble than to face it. Keanu saw it all.
Eyes
Darkened, but his voice was calm. He walked up to the woman, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, and said, "You sit with me." The woman looked up in shock, recognizing him instantly. She nodded, and for the first time that evening, her lips trembled into a small smile. The men went quiet for a moment, realizing who had stepped in. But arrogance is a dangerous fuel. "What? You think being a movie star makes you a hero?" One of them spat. Keanu did not respond, simply guided the woman toward the boarding lane. His steady presence enough to silence some of the laughter. Still, he knew this was not the end of it. He'd rarely dies quietly. Once on the plane, Keanu took his seat beside the woman. She whispered her thanks, voice breaking. "My name is Layla," she said softly. "I just wanted to visit my sister. Didn't mean to cause trouble." "You did nothing wrong," Keanu said. "Don't carry their shame. It's not yours." Engines roared, the plane lifted, and soon they were above the Pacific Ocean, a sea of darkness stretching endlessly below. The cabin lights dimmed, and most passengers tried to settle into uneasy sleep. But Keanu did not rest. He noticed the same group of men, a few rows back, whispering, laughing, and glancing toward Layla, and then it began. One of them stood up. Blocking the aisle, another shoved past a flight attendant. The mockery turned sharper, louder, until the insults spread through the cabin like poison. People froze. Some pulled out their phones, recording. Others pretended to sleep, praying not to get involved. The flight attendants tried to calm the men but were pushed aside. Layla shrank in her seat, her hands trembling. Keanu stood. His voice was steady. Not loud, but it carried like thunder. "Enough." The men laughed. "Oh look, the Hollywood hero wants to play savior." Keanu took a step forward, his eyes locked on them. "Sit down now." The cabin went silent. Passengers held their breath, watching. Keanu was not just an actor anymore. He was a man willing to risk himself for someone who had no one else to defend her. But the men didn't back down. One of them swung a fist. Keanu moved like water, fast, precise but controlled. He caught the man's arm, twisted gently, and forced him back into his seat without throwing a single punch. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, his voice low, "but I will protect her." Another rushed forward, but Keanu sidestepped, guiding him down with a calmness that came from years of training, not just in martial arts for films, but in discipline for life. The passengers erupted in whispers. Phones recorded every second. The world would soon see this, but in that moment, it wasn't about cameras. It was about right and wrong. Finally, the men were forced back, restrained. With the help of flight attendants, Layla sat in tears, whispering prayers of thanks. Keanu returned to his seat, his breathing steady, his expression calm, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But then, something more terrifying unfolded. A sudden jolt shook the plane. Oxygen masks dropped. Gasps filled the cabin. The captain's voice came through, strained and broken. We are experiencing a critical system failure. Communications are down. Stand by." The line went dead. Fear spread like fire. Children cried, adults clutched their seats, and panic clawed at every heart. Keanu closed his eyes for a brief second, then opened them with quiet determination. He reached into his backpack, pulled out a sleek device that looked more like a personal tablet than a phone. Few knew that Keanu had quietly invested in advanced aviation technology, working with engineers to create systems for emergency control. He never spoke about it publicly. He never bragged. But now, 30,000 feet above the ocean, it might be the only thing standing between life and death. As the plane shook violently, Keanu connected his device to the emergency override system. His fingers moved fast, steady, without hesitation. The screen lit up. Remote cockpit access secured. LAILA stared in disbelief. You can fly this plane?" Keanu looked at her, his voice firm but gentle. "I can try. I won't let us fall." The story of one night, one flight had just begun. The storm above the ocean's cabin was filled with panic. The oxygen masks dangled from the ceiling and people were crying, some whispering last prayers, others frozen in silent terror. Clutched the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white, Keanu sat upright, calm in the chaos, his fingers moving across the strange device in his hands. The passengers did not know what he was doing, but they could feel a strange sense of hope radiating from him. The leader of the racist group, his lips swollen from the earlier confrontation, shouted from his seat, "You can't control a plane. From a phone, stop pretending. You'll get us all killed." Keanu ignored him. His voice was steady as he spoke to the flight attendants. "Keep everyone calm. Tell them to breathe slowly. Panic will burn oxygen faster." The chief attendant, shaking but brave, nodded and followed his instructions. She began walking down the aisle, repeating his words softly to passengers. Meanwhile, device in Keanu's hands connected to the aircraft's digital systems. The screen flickered, showing warnings in red. Engine instability, navigation offline, pilot unresponsive ACUS. Chest tightened. It wasn't just a system error. Something had happened in the cockpit. He turned to Layla, who was pale and trembling. "Stay strong. I need to check the front." He stood, moving quickly past terrified passengers until he reached the locked cockpit door. He knocked firmly. "Captain, this is Keanu Reeves. Are you conscious?" Silence. He tried again, louder this time. "Captain, co-pilot, answer me." A faint groan came through the door, weak and broken. Keanu's stomach dropped. The flight attendant rushed up. Captain collapsed mid-sentence before the systems failed. She whispered, tears in her eyes. "We thought it was just stress, but what if?" Keanu placed a hand on the door. "Unlock it." "Sir, regulations won't matter if we're at the bottom of the ocean," Keanu said softly but firmly. She hesitated, then used her keycard. The door opened slightly. The smell of smoke and burned wires rushed out. Inside, the cockpit was dim. Sparks flickered from the control panels. The captain slumped over his seat, unconscious, while the co-pilot was barely breathing, his face pale as if poisoned. Keanu single quotes, his mind raced. This was no normal malfunction. Had caused this, and then he noticed Eitan. Empty food tray pushed aside near the co-pilot's chair. A bitter smell lingered in the air. Someone had tampered with their meals. Back in the cabin, the group of racist men were laughing quietly, whispering among themselves. Keanu narrowed his eyes. He pulled the captain gently from his chair, laying him on the floor, checking his pulse. He was relieved to feel it faint but steady. "Still alive," he muttered. With the attendant's help, the pilots were carried back into the cabin to receive oxygen. Now the cockpit was empty, silent except for the beeping of failing systems. Keanu sat in the captain's seat, the glow of the monitors reflecting in his eyes. For a moment he felt the weight of hundreds of lives pressing on his shoulders. His phone beeped. Manual override available. External stabilizers engaged. He exhaled slowly. Then he spoke into the intercom. "This is Keanu Reeves. I'm not a pilot. I have emergency access to this aircraft systems. I need everyone calm and trusting me right now. If you pray, pray. If you love someone, hold them close. But do not give in to fear. We're not going down tonight." The cabin fell silent. Even the children stopped crying for a moment. His words carried a strength that no actor could fake. It was the strength of a man who meant every syllable. He took the controls through his device. The plane steadied slightly, no longer shaking as violently. The passengers gasped in relief, clapping softly, though fear still lingered in their eyes. Layla leaned forward, speaking into the intercom for him. "Saving us. Believe in him, please." The passengers nodded. But then, another problem appeared. On the radar screen, a massive storm front stretched across their path. Lightning flashing like angry fire in the clouds, the auto-navigation would normally reroute around such danger. But the system was gone. Keanu had only manual adjustments through his device. The storm was alive. Twisting, monstrous, with thunder that rattled the metal body of the plane, a man shouted from the back, "We're doomed." Keanu gripped the controls tighter. His voice was soft but firm. "No, we fight." He pulled the plane higher, trying to climb above the storm, but sudden turbulence hit them, throwing drinks and bags into the air. People screamed. Luggage tumbled from overhead bins. Keanu braced himself, holding steady. Every second felt like war, every choice between life and death, and in the chaos. He glanced at the device and saw something that froze his blood: the navigation. The system had been deliberately disabled. Not by accident. Not by nature. Someone on board had hacked the plane. And now, lightning struck near the wing, shaking them again. Keanu single quotes as jaw tightened. He whispered to himself, "Whoever you are. Stop you. But first, I keep them alive." The storm roared louder, the plane diving into the heart of darkness. Asterisk, the hidden hand storm outside, raged like a living monster. But inside the cabin, the air was heavier with fear. Children cried softly, their mothers rocking them, whispering comfort they barely believed themselves. An elderly man clutched his chest, breathing in short gasps. Every jolt of turbulence felt like the final one. Keanu's single quotes S voice cut through the panic. "Listen to me. We are still in the sky. We are still alive. We will stay alive if we stay calm." But even as he spoke, a sharp alarm rang across the cockpit panels. One of the engines had failed. The plane tilted, groaning against the storm's weight. Passengers screamed, some praying louder now. Keanu's fingers flew across his device, redirecting power to stabilize the remaining engines. The plane leveled slightly, though the vibrations shook the floor beneath their feet. He whispered to himself, almost like a mantra, "Steady, steady, steady." As he worked, the co-pilot stirred weakly in the cabin. His lips trembled as he whispered, "It wasn't accident. Someone." Inside, then he fell unconscious again, the words lingering like poison in the air. Keanu knew it already. But hearing it confirmed what his gut had screamed: their enemy was not the storm, it was someone among them. He stood and addressed the cabin. "Someone has tampered with this plane. I don't know who yet, but we will find out." Eyes darted across the rows. Suspicion spread like wildfire. Whispers hissed through the air. Blame, fear, doubt. To stop panic from tearing them apart, Keanu raised his hand. "We don't accuse blindly. We work together. I need volunteers." A few hands rose slowly. Layla's was first, then a man with a kind face who introduced himself as a retired avionics technician. Another was a mother traveling with her teenage son, her voice shaking but determined as she said, "We'll help. Tell us what to do." Keanu nodded. "Good. You are my calm team. Everyone else, listen to them as you listen to me." He sent the technician and the boy to quietly check the cabin for anything unusual: bags, wires, devices that didn't belong. Layla stayed beside him, translating for passengers who didn't speak English well, her voice steady, despite the fear in her eyes as they searched. The racist men in the back laughed again, though quieter this time. One of them muttered, "Maybe we don't make it after all." Keanu's gaze flicked toward them, sharp as steel, but he did not confront them yet. He had no proof. Minutes later, the boy returned, his face pale. "Sir, we found something." In his trembling hands was a small black box, no bigger than a power bank. Hidden under a seat in row 27, a faint red light blinked on it. Gasps filled the cabin. The technician examined it with wide eyes. "This isn't normal. It's a transmitter. It's maybe remote control, maybe a jammer. This thing could have shut down navigation." The light blinked faster, as if aware it had been discovered. Keanu's single quotes, his chest tightened. He took the box carefully, holding it as far as he could from the passengers. "If this sends signals, we need to block them." The technician thought for a moment. Wrap it in thick metal. Maybe food trays. The aluminum might cage it. Without hesitation, passengers tore off trays, wrapping them tightly around the device until the light dimmed. For a moment, relief spread. But then the plane lurched violently again, a bolt of lightning flashing so close it blinded the windows. People screamed as the aircraft dipped hard. Drinks and phones tumbled across the aisle. Keanu steadied the controls again, his heart pounding, and then something worse happened. His device flashed a warning. "Manual override breached, unauthorized access. Detected. Someone else was trying to control the plane, not from outside, but from inside." Keanu single quotes, his voice dropped to a whisper. "The enemy is not done. They're still here, and they're watching." The storm outside screamed, but the storm inside the cabin was just beginning. Eyes in the dark cabin was silent, except for the groaning of the engines and the rattling of the storm. Every passenger felt it in their bones. Someone among them wanted the plane to fall. Keanu's steady hands kept the aircraft level, but his mind was racing. The warning on his device pulsed again. "Unauthorized. Access detected. System breach ongoing." Keanu looked toward the passengers. "Listen carefully. The plane is still in my control, but someone here is trying to take it from me. I need everyone alert. No one moves without reason. No one touches a device unless I say so." People nodded, fear etched deep in their faces. Mothers held their children tighter. Elderly passengers whispered prayers under their breath. The racist men in the back chuckled again, one of them lifting his phone high, as if mocking Keanu. "Maybe it's me, movie star? Maybe I'm the villain you're looking for." Keanu's voice was calm, but it carried iron. "If it were you, I'd already know." The man's smirk faltered. The avionics technician leaned close to Keanu. "Sir, this breach, it's not coming from the outside anymore. It's inside the system. Maybe someone smuggled hardware that's still active." Keanu nodded. "Then we'll find it." He turned to Layla. "Walk the rows. Watch faces. Fear looks different from guilt. Guilt avoids eyes." Layla hesitated, then stood tall. Though her hands shook, she moved slowly down the aisle, her eyes sharp, scanning every passenger. That was when the turbulence hit again, sudden, violent. The plane dropped so hard that people screamed as if the sky itself had ripped open. Oxygen masks swung wildly, luggage crashed to the floor. Keanu gripped the controls, his muscles straining. "Hold on." Lightning flashed so close that it lit every face in the cabin for an instant. In that instant, Layla saw it. A man near the middle rows, sitting alone, clutching a laptop pressed too tightly to his chest. His eyes were wild, darting toward the cockpit, then back to his screen. She shouted him. "Row 14. The man bolted. The cabin erupted in chaos as he shoved past passengers trying to reach the back. The racist men stood halfway, unsure whether to stop him or cheer him. Keanu handed the device controls to the technician and ran down the aisle with a speed that stunned everyone. He caught the man by the shoulder just before he reached the emergency exit. The laptop slipped, clattering to the floor. Screen showing strange streams of code, the man hissed. You don't understand, they'll kill me if I fail. Keanu's grip tightened. Who? Before the man could answer, one of the racist group lunged forward, grabbing the laptop. Don't let him ruin it, shouted. It was no longer a mystery. Attackers were connected. Keanu spun, striking the racist man's arm just enough to make him drop the laptop, then shoved both men back into the aisle. The passengers screamed, pulling away as the struggle grew violent, but then, in the chaos, the laptop screen changed. A new message appeared in blood-red letters. Emergency descent initiated. Altitude. Drop in 90 seconds. Gasps filled the cabin. People cried out. Keanu's heart slammed in his chest. He shouted to the technician, "Take manual override now." The man scrambled, his hands shaking, but Keanu knew it wasn't enough. He lifted the laptop, staring into the lines of code, as if they were another enemy. His mind flashed back to long nights years ago when he had quietly funded engineers, learning from them in secret, testing emergency aviation programs. He wasn't a coder, but he remembered enough. He began typing furiously, bypassing strings of code, redirecting loops. His voice was steady even as sweat ran down his face. Not today, and not like this. The passengers held their breath as seconds bled away. The number on the laptop ticked down 60. 45:30. The plane tilted hard, dropping fast. Screams tore through the cabin. Luggage flew. Drinks splattered. People clung to anything they could hold. Keanu's single quotes, his fingers flew. Faster than anyone thought possible. And then he hit enter. The screen went black dot for a heartbeat. Nothing happened. Then his device beeped. Manual override restored. Descent canceled. The passengers erupted in tears and gasps of relief. Some clapping, others whispering his name, as if he were more than a man. Keanu closed his eyes briefly, whispering to himself, "Thank you." But when he opened them, his gaze locked on the hacker. The man was sobbing now, shaking. "You don't understand. It isn't just me. There's another. There's always another." The storm outside cracked with lightning, thunder shaking. The cabin, as if the sky itself confirmed the warning. Asterisk the second shadow for a few fragile minutes. Relief washed through the cabin. People hugged one another, some weeping openly, grateful they were still alive. The storm outside still roared, but the knowledge that Keanu had stopped the deadly descent gave them hope. But Keanu did not relax. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharp. The hacker's words echoed in his mind. There's another. There's always another. He turned to the trembling man who now sat in the aisle, guarded by passengers. "Tell me everything," Keanu demanded. The man's lips shook. I was forced. They promised to spare my family if I did this. They gave me the device, told me the codes. I didn't want to," Keanu cut him off softly. "Who gave them to you?" The man's eyes darted around the cabin, full of terror. "You don't understand. They're watching even now. I'm already dead." Before Keanu could press further, the avionics technician shouted from the cockpit. "Sir, we've got another breach. Different signal. It's not from his laptop. It's something else." The passengers gasped, their fragile hope cracking again. Keanu stood slowly, scanning the cabin. Every face carried fear, but some hid secrets. "Search again," he said firmly. "Check every row. Check every bag. This plane is not falling." Layla and a few volunteers moved quickly, opening compartments, lifting cushions, checking under. Seats. Tension filled the air, every second stretching like an eternity. Then Layla froze. Near the back, under an old duffel bag, she found another black device larger than the first, with wires coiled like veins. Its light blinked faster, sharper, like a heartbeat about to burst. Her voice trembled. "Keanu, this one is bigger." The technician rushed forward, examining it with horror. "This isn't just a jammer. This could override entire systems. Maybe even trigger fuel instability." A wave of panic spread through the cabin. People screamed, pushing against seats, desperate to get away. Keanu raised his hand. "Stop. Running will not save you. Listen to me. We face this together." His calm tone steadied them again, though. Fear still throbbed in the air. He knelt beside the device, studying it. Can it be disabled? The technician shook his head. Not safely. One wrong wire, and it could trigger whatever it's programmed for. Keanu's mind raced. Then he turned to Layla. Get me food trays, all of them, and any aluminum foil. No. Passengers hurried to tear apart trays and wrappers, passing them forward. Keanu wrapped the device layer after layer, building a makeshift cage. The blinking slowed, then dimmed. But before relief could take root, one of the racist men stood suddenly, his face twisted with anger. Enough of this. You're all letting a Hollywood actor play hero while we sit here like sheep. This whole thing is fake. A setup to make him look good, murmurs rippled through the cabin. Fear makes people desperate, and doubt is a poison. Keanu stood slowly, his eyes meeting the man's. You think this is fake? You think I want fame in this moment? Look at your children, your families. Look at their faces. This isn't about me. It's about them. The man faltered, but before he could reply, another sharp jolt shook the plane. This time, the lights flickered and dimmed. Keanu's single quotes as device beeped again. Fuel system compromised. Leakage detected. Gasps tore through the cabin. The technician whispered in horror. If that leak continues, we won't have enough fuel to reach land. Keanu steadied himself. Then we patch it. Show me where. The technician hesitated. Sir, the leak is near the wing. We'd have to go outside. A heavy silence fell. Outside was nothing but black sky and roaring storm. Lightning ripped through the clouds, wind screaming across the metal body of the plane. To step out, there was almost certain death. Keanu looked at the terrified passengers. He thought of Layla's trembling hands, the children clinging to their parents, the old man who whispered prayers with every breath. Then he whispered to himself, if no one else can, I will. He pulled on an emergency harness, fastening it tightly. Layla grabbed his arm, her eyes wet with tears. You can't, it's suicide. Keanu placed his hand gently on hers. Sometimes saving others means stepping into the storm. Trust me, I'll come back. With that, he opened the emergency hatch. The roar of the storm flooded the cabin, wind tearing through like a beast. Lightning illuminated his face for a split second, calm yet unyielding. Before he stepped out into the raging dark, the passengers held their breath, watching him vanish into the night sky, tethered only by a fragile harness and unshakable courage. Through the stormed night sky, swallowed Keanu as he stepped onto the wing. Wind howled like 1,000 screaming voices, and rain lashed against his face with the force of knives. Lightning tore across the heavens, each flash illuminating his lone figure clinging to the trembling body of the plane, inside the cabin. Passengers pressed against windows, watching in stunned silence. Layla's hands were clasped so tightly they bled at the knuckles. Her lips moved in silent prayer. Keanu crawled carefully, every movement against the furious wind, a battle. The harness strained as the storm tried to rip him away. The metal was slick with water, and the vibrations of the engines rattled through his arms. Finally, he reached the source of the problem, a jagged tear near the fuel line, caused not by weather but by deliberate sabotage. Wires hung from the damage, sparking dangerously. His breath caught. One wrong spark could ignite everything. With shaking hands numbed by cold, Keanu pulled a small repair kit from his belt. He worked slowly, carefully, using the last bits of aluminum from the food trays to patch the line. Sparks hissed, threatening, but his hands did not falter. Inside, the technician whispered, "He's buying us time. He's actually doing it." Then the worst, a massive gust of wind slammed against the wing. Keanu's body lifted, his harness jerking violently. He dangled for a heart-stopping moment, the storm trying to claim him. Passengers screamed, watching in horror. Leia cried out, "Hold on!" Keanu gritted his teeth, pulling himself back with sheer strength, muscles burning. He slammed his hand down, gripping the edge of the wing, hauling himself back inch by inch, until he was flat against the metal again. His chest heaved, but his eyes burned with determination. "Not yet," he whispered. He pressed the final patch into place, sealing the leak. The device in his pocket beeped. Fuel system stabilized. The cabin erupted in relieved cheers. Some cried, some clapped, but all of them stared at the man outside. The plane with awe, Keanu slowly made his way back, every step heavy, until he finally collapsed inside the hatch. Layla rushed to him, tears streaming. "You saved us," she whispered. He managed a small smile. "We're not safe yet," because then his device beeped one last warning. Altitude lock engaged, forced descent in 5 minutes. The passengers groaned, their fragile hope shattered again. Keanu rose to his feet, every muscle aching, but his spirit unbroken. He strode to the hacker, who was still trembling in the aisle. "You said there was always another. Tell me where," the hacker sobbed. "There's a final trigger. Hidden in the luggage hold. It's the kill switch." Keanu didn't hesitate. He grabbed a flashlight and moved to the lower deck. The air was colder there, darker, with only the hum of machinery. He searched row by row until he found a final black box, larger than the rest, hidden deep in the cargo. Its red light pulsed like a beating heart. He crouched, staring at it. There was no time to disarm carefully. 5 minutes was already almost gone, so he did the only thing left. He pulled the device from his pocket, connected it directly, and began typing furiously. Overriding every code, sweat dripped down his face. His fingers trembled, but his eyes stayed locked. The box fought back, resisting lines of code changing as fast as he typed. But Keanu's voice was steady. "You won't take them. Not tonight." Finally, the red light blinked slower, then died. His device read, "Forced descent canceled. Full manual control restored." Keanu exhaled deeply, his body slumping. Against the metal wall, when he climbed back into the cabin, cheers exploded. People hugged, clapped, shouted his name. The children who had cried now smiled. Strangers held hands like family. Keanu only raised a hand. "We made it." He guided the plane the rest of the way through the storm, his device steadying their course. Hours later, as dawn painted the horizon, he landed safely at a small emergency strip in Japan. As the wheels touched down, the cabin filled with tears, and applause louder than thunder. When the doors opened, rescue teams rushed aboard, but many passengers lingered, unwilling to leave before thanking him. Layla hugged him tightly, whispering, "You didn't just save our lives, you restored our faith." Keanu only smiled softly. "The real heroes were all of you for staying strong." The story spread across the world in hours. Videos from the passengers went viral. Keanu fighting attackers, flying the plane, crawling across the wing in the storm. News anchors called him the man who became a real-life hero. But when reporters searched for him later, he was gone. No interviews, no spotlight. Just as quietly as he had boarded that flight, Keanu disappeared into the crowd, carrying only his backpack and his humility. Because for him, it was never about fame. It was about doing the right thing when it mattered most.